Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Diane Taylor. I'm the Director of Public Programs here at the National Building Museum. The museum was established by an act of Congress in 1980, and we are our nation's museum to the built environment. Our mission is to inspire curiosity about the world we design and build. For more than 2 decades, the museum series Spotlight on Design has presented luminaries and legends in architecture, landscape architecture, and urban planning. Spotlight on Design celebrates the philosophies and creative journeys of the voices that shape and characterize our built environment. Tonight, we're very fortunate to have the museum's exhibition, Capital Brutalism, on view. I hope you had a chance to explore, especially the speculative projects, imagining how brutalist buildings can be interpreted today, including Brooks and Scarpa's project for the Weaver Building. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize and thank our wonderful sponsors, the Anthony and Keiko Greenberg Foundation, as well as KCCT, who are celebrating 40 years of enduring design. I'd also like to thank our passionate and dedicated museum staff and colleagues who work so hard to make programs like this possible. I'd now like to welcome Christopher Peoples, principal at KCCT. Public programs like this one would not be possible without support and sponsorship. Thank you for making it possible to celebrate the practice of architecture.
Thank you, Diane, and thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. I want to really state how pleased we are to be a sponsor in this year's program, Spotlight on Design, which brought many architects to DC that, some of the best design in the nation. So we are happy to be here tonight, and I do want to say that, we have brought many architects to DC for this program, and tonight, to wind up the fall season, I am pleased to announce my friends, Angela Brooks and Larry Scarpa. Please enjoy the presentation tonight.
So if you haven't figured it out already, Angie and I were partners in practice, but also partners in life. We've been married for 37 years now, and never thought I would work with my spouse. I grew up in a little Italian family restaurant, and you can imagine the kids and the parents, it was all day bickering. And I'm like, I'm never gonna work with my spouse. But we happen to work very well together, and you're gonna see tonight that we have different and complementing strengths that I think make our practice unique. So we're gonna talk about this idea of beauty, and we've struggled with this for quite a while because our practice is we have a lot of paradoxes in what we do as architects, and in today's world it seems very strange to talk about beauty. It feels almost morally wrong, as if there's something incorrect or superficial about beauty. And beauty really contributes to the human experience in unique and compelling ways. And over the years as a firm, we've worked for severely disadvantaged population, and as well as people with big budgets. And we struggled with this and tried to find kind of meaning in what we do. So tonight we're going to show you some things of how we work and what we like to call a parallel universe. On the surface, this looks a bit like a contradiction or a double standard, but I think after now almost 3 decades of work, some clarity has been emerging for us on what we do, and we're going to try and articulate that and share with you those ideas. Beauty is deeply intertwined with human values, social structures, and individual well-being. Its relevance can be seen in the way societies and cultures celebrate, pursue, and define beauty. It impacts almost every aspect of life, from art and architecture to daily routines and social norms. Physical beauty takes on many forms. It is self-justifying. You really can't argue with it, and it may never be denigrated by an appeal to something higher or more spiritual. For most of us, when we hear the word beauty, this is what comes to mind. It's physical beauty. Now, while this kind of beauty is real and powerful and can transform the heart, there are other kinds of beauty equally as powerful and transforming. Moral beauty is connected to a greater good, doing something beyond mere physical or emotional beauty. Nonetheless, it is really powerful and creates memorable experiences that have lasting effects on our well-being. This is Kent. He's one of our tenants that lives in an affordable housing project we designed for disabled veterans. And a study by the National Institute of Health and Sciences finds that when people give and help others in need, it activates regions of the brain associated with pleasure, social connection, and trust. So, I ask really, which is right, which is really beautiful, what matters the most? The answer really lies in the creator, the storyteller. And that's what we do as architects. We're visual storytellers. We tell stories about beauty. So for us, the story's complex. It contains contradictions, struggles, and inconsistencies. We believe there's a fine line between what is seen as beautiful and peculiar, between fine art and popular culture. And we're interested in that moment where the two commingle. We're interested in being both the teacher and the student and finding things that are extraordinary within the ordinary. Here is a Picasso painting and one of the many people that attend Burning Man. It's like there's really a fine line between those people. So we really try to look like right in front of us. As I like to say, we don't invent anything. I just try to look right in front and see the beauty that exists in things that others maybe take for granted or never even consider beautiful. Like when I look at those cups with lemonade and tea in it, I get really excited. It's like, I know it sounds strange, but the color there is like miraculous, So I kind of see architecture when I see that, and I look for kind of the beauty. And when they stick with me. And so years ago when we got our first real client, it was a corporate client. He asked me to meet out at a site. It was about a 30,000 square foot interiors. And he had a huge program with a lot of small offices. and I could see light was going to be a problem. So he asked me what I was thinking, and I didn't want to get fired on the first meeting, so I tried not to say too much, but I couldn't help it. He got it out of me. I said, I'm thinking Dixie cups. And he said, you are not putting Dixie cups in my space. So I went back to the office and I made this mock-up and I sent it to him. And I get the email back with the, capital wow and all the exclamation points. Like, what is this? And I said, those are Dixie cups. And away we went. So we built the space. It was a really simple idea. The offices took away the light, so we made the Dixie cups like apertures that were these oculus that allow light to come into the space. And he made us give them thousands of extra Dixie cups because he was worried. So I stopped by, from time to time to visit. And one day they're all white Dixie cups. The next day they're all green, and then all blue. The guy who didn't want Dixie cups is now playing with our building. It's the best thing ever, So we've experimented with all kinds of things, including ping pong balls and other, other materials. And these are, for us, serious investigations, how to solve problems. We had done lots of edit studios, and all the editors always want pitch black rooms. And when I asked why, it was because glare was like a needle in their eyes. So for us, these studies became, how do you solve the glare problem? And what we found is ping pong balls create this like pixelation that has no glare, but almost like a slight reduction of clarity. And so away we went. So we made these studios with apertures of ping pong balls. And what you see when you come in is this. And people see it and they're like attracted by the light and the kind of magic of the light. But then when they get close to it, they understand it's something familiar to them. And it heightens their kind of experience. And I would think what Robert Venturi wrote in his book, Complexity and Contradictions, when he said, a familiar thing seen in an unfamiliar way becomes both perceptually old and new at the same time. So this idea of light is really critical. And it creates like emotion. And so I think of this idea of emotional beauty, which is very different from physical beauty. Emotional beauty is really not the beauty of a sunset or a great painting, but it's the beauty of a particular expression. This is a mosque in Cordoba, Spain, that was built right around 1000 AD. We know the Pantheon, but we never really think too much of the building. We always think about the light, and that's what you remember about the Pantheon. And light has an unforgettable impact on our physical perception of space and time. Like physical beauty, there's a divine quality of emotional beauty, and light leaves memories that are rarely forgotten. Whether or not we remember what the physical object looks like, we always remember the kind of quality or the emotion. I got it here. I worked for Paul Rudolph, and at the time I worked for him, I didn't understand this, but I do now, his understanding of light. And he used to make these drawings that you see here. He used to try to draw what you couldn't see. He would try to draw the light and capture kind of the emotion of that. And, this drawing for the Tuskegee Chapel, he would tell me, light should enter while space escapes. And he did this for other buildings. He drew other buildings he admired and try to understand how light affected it. And so like Picasso, who made these paintings where, two eyes don't exist on the same side of the face, but he knew those things were there and they had these magical qualities. And you could see Rudolph's drawing and what was there. It just, you can't explain it, but there's magic that happens and you never forget when you're in this space. And so we've always looked at this idea of light as being important for us. And we forget these ideas sometimes, but we're reminded by things that we see. So, I was up at 5 a.m. getting my coffee, and they were painting this bus shelter. And I'm like, this is like magic, the color and the light. And so I got to the office that morning and we started a whole thing about how materials can broadcast light. And this is part of what I describe as a parallel universe, is that we're doing things a lot in the office that don't have clients or a paying customer for our work. We're following things that interest us and things that we think have meaning. So we started looking at all kinds of different materials, how they broadcast light, and there's recycled glass, marbles, and we got enamored with the drawing on the bottom. I don't know if any of you have been to the hardware store where they have these acrylics and there are thousands of colors, but there's not one nice color, and so I just got a whole bunch of them and started to stack them to try and make a nice color. And the layering of those produced these really beautiful patterns. So we had a project under construction. I said, we have to do that. And so we put skylights in the offices, backlit these panels. This is 8 layers of 1/8 inch acrylic to create these patterns and light. At the same time, we were making this in the project. This was another kind of experiment that I got the thing on the liquid stone. We call this liquid wood. And this is another edit studio where we couldn't convince them to have natural light. So we made this wall that was alive in a way. And our client loves it because he tells their client, go to Studio 2 and they point at the wall. You can see the little cracks maybe up there, the shadow. Those are the doors. They look at it a bit puzzled and they go touch the wall and they kind of fall into the studio. And it's kind of interesting because, sometimes when you're at parties or doing things socially, we do a lot of work in the entertainment industry. And, someone will say, well, what do you do? And I'll tell them the name of a company and they scratch their head. I go, it's got this wood wall in it. They go, I've been there, and they know it by their experience, and we don't think of that enough, this idea of touch. And when someone touches your building, they never forget it. The memory's always there. And we like to think of that experience. So it happens to all of us. We all have special places. And I think if you were to close your eyes for a moment and think of a special place to you, you could see it in your mind as clear as day, like yesterday. And when you return there, it never looks the way that you remember it. But the experience always stays with you. And in a way, that's what we try to do. We try to leave something behind in your memory that doesn't rely on the physical form of the building. And so we have these things, we make them, they're around our office, and they're almost like a curiosity of cabinets. And sometimes people come in and they look at them and they ask, clients, what is that? And, we'll show it to them and explain it. And, often a client will say, can I have one of those? And we had this client who saw that little maquette there, the metal one, And I said, okay, I guess so. I think we can do something. And we were under construction with this prop placement company, and they needed a dressing room. So we just started making this. We're going to make a dressing room based on that idea. These are the guys making it. Here it is going to the site. The building's pretty much complete, the interior. And, you know, I'm thinking I didn't know how to cover it at all. You know, like how do you skin that building? And, you know, I'm driving down home right on the corner of our house. The auto mechanic that fixes my old Volvo, his name's William Leaf III. You know, he has a sign there that says automotive genius. And right under it, it says, will shrink wrap anything, you know? And I pulled in and I'm like, William, you do, I had no idea you do shrink wrap. You know, so he shows me the boat and everything. I do planes, I can do anything. So I run back to the office, I get that maquette, and I bring it to him. I go, can you shrink wrap this? You know, well, the next day I come over there and he's a lot more humble. It didn't quite work out the way he was thinking. So I talked to him, you know, mostly out of fear of losing him because I thought I had a solution to my problem. And I was dreading, you know, fielding the call from my client who had already been bugging me, you know, what are we going to cover this with? And I didn't want to have to tell him I had no idea what I was doing. William was going to become my savior. And so after a couple hours of talking to William what the problems were, we took we took this back, made some modifications, treated it a bit, solved some problems, treated it a bit like a pig on a spit. And there's William making the installation. And so it looks like this. And, you know, you can't do this in just a drawing. It's like the magic comes from kind of the making and the light and all those things. And, you know, we I think are calculated risk takers, but we bring our clients with us. So a lot of times when we do these things, our clients are as invested as we are. And some of our failures become their failures too. And we love this because, you know, in a world today where you can almost predict everything, it leaves kind of the magic of making. There are other examples, light that we've done. This is a house in Chicago we completed not too long ago. And, you know, I always love buildings that move, you know, but buildings don't move too well. So we try to come up with this idea of, you can see from that little vid of a building that appears to kind of move or change. And so this building goes from solid to open based on how the viewer participates in it. It's a courtyard building. We drew every brick in the building, many different drawings. And of course, a lot of you know, when the contractors see this kind of stuff, they scratch their head and they go, this is gonna be really expensive, you know? And so we're prepared for that. So our owners get scared, but we have the ammunition. So we have this drawing ready for them to show them how to do it and then explain, you know, how it's made and how you do it. And then once they understand it, it becomes very economical to do. In fact, this particular mason was like, he started to have a lot of unwanted suggestions of what we should do. Yeah. So here it is in construction. You get an idea, and then this is kind of what you see. This is not a Photoshop or anything, and what I always knew the light would be important, how it hit it, but I did not fully comprehend how the light would simultaneously come from behind and also hit the front. And so this has this kind of dynamic way of how the facade is being lit from both behind it, and in front of it. And so here you can see a detail of that. And our owner loves it because he says people drive by and they stop in the middle of the street and then they back their car up, and they pull forward. They think something's happened, like something just happened to them, and they don't quite understand the building. And I think that's so great because it's like an experience that they never forget. Let's see if this will.
As you walk past it,
you're not really sure when you look at the front of the house that it's actually a house, because there's nothing house-like about that front wall. It's beautiful, it's geometric, but it's not traditionally residential.
The building, you're able to see through it at points, but as you move, it will literally close up.
I'm trying to think how best to express it.
In some ways, it's like cloaked or not there. So it's there and it's not there.
People are stopped in their tracks just looking at the brick screen. They find it so interesting and unique.
I guess it's mysterious. People, when they drive down the street, they sort of do a little double take because they can't see through it, and then they can. And so they stop their car and they look, and then they back up and they pull forward and back up, and like they're trying to see through the building before they take off.
This is another house we just finished that's in architecture record this month. But this idea of, something we've thought about too is not just light, but reflection. And this is Peter and Allison Smithson's, one of their installations, where they put mirrors in the landscape so you see the sky and the land together, which you never do, which creates this kind of awareness of where you are. And so we thought of this home as kind of being transparent and reflective, but really part of its place. This is on 60 acres in North Carolina. It's the first time we ever had to not deal with a setback in our career. So it was kind of refreshing. This is the house. It's hard to see. It's clearly a mark on the landscape, but I still think it feels like it belongs. And these are just some shots of like what happens to the building on the site during different times of day. So like the Lipton House, it's ever changing, not just with its reflection, but also the ability to kind of see into the house simultaneously while you're seeing behind you. So you see what's in front of you and what's behind you all together. And I think that makes you aware of its place and where it belongs. And that's also from the inside as well. This idea of reflection is also critically important and something that we think about. There's an idea too that we think about that we call useful beauty. And that's a more general way of, what one might call functional beauty. It's a thing's function as being integral to its aesthetic qualities, or things' aesthetic qualities emerging from its function, or something closely related to its function, such as purpose, use, or end. And functional beauty can embody the idea of physical and emotional beauty as well. They're not really mutually exclusive. This spiny praying mantis is like, beautiful thing, but those are just meant to be eyes and make it bigger. So it really acts as something that's functional. And we did a project in LA using this one shutter, and we did it for performative purposes. Our site had great views downtown of the mountains, but busy urban area. And so how do you solve this problem when the main facades want all glass and they face east and west? And so we used this shutter as the mitigator, and we built one shutter and we put it over the entire building. So what happens is the building changes daily. It is a reflection of the occupants inside it. And so you get this kind of quality of light and transparency and movement that you wouldn't normally have. So just what happened with this building, when we had this idea, the developer looked and said, boy, that skin looks very expensive. Maybe we should look at value engineering that. And I was like, okay. He said, can you show me what it looks like without the skin on that building? And we made a drawing for him, and he's like, it's really ugly, but we're saving like hundreds of thousands of dollars. And he said, let's just pursue it a little bit. So we send it to our consultants, and our mechanical engineer looks at it and he goes, oh, you're removing that shading device? He says, we're gonna have to upsize all the AC, and then our structural looked at it and goes, oh, you're changing the equipment on the roof? We're gonna have to upsize the structure. So at the end of the day, this cost the owner about $50,000. He thinks we're a genius, And I think what we try to do is we don't just make our buildings about aesthetics, we make them about performance. And so this idea of being useful or functional, I think always wins us design, and that's kind of what we're interested in. This is a school that we just finished that burned down. If you look at the neighborhood, this is South Central LA. It's a tough neighborhood. It's all gray, just like that. When we got the commission, I thought, this is great. We have, get to do a school. But if you look at that diagram on the right, there were setbacks, power lines, and an abandoned oil well. The resultant of all those is that exact shape, and that became our building form. So it was kind of predetermined, but we made the oil well access a courtyard for the school. And we took the building that had burned down, we cut up all the slabs, and this became the courtyard for the building. It's a catch basin, it's permeable. You can see it here, and this is the space for the kids. You notice this is in a tough neighborhood, and people say, why yellow? It's like, well, it's the only bright spot in the whole neighborhood, and it's become a kind of bit of community pride now. And so, just to illustrate how ridiculous this is, that picture on the lower right, that's for a BMW commercial. So now they're doing like BMW commercials in a poor school in South Central LA. But they take care of this building with such great pride, and we don't really understand that. We take it for granted, or we think that poor people just destroy things. But the light quality here, it's a total secure building, it's bulletproof, but we use the screen to create security, privacy, and again, the same thing, because of the curved form, it lights from behind and in front, and you get kind of this magical depth through how light broadcasts on the building. And what happens is in the classrooms, they all have private courtyards. They can see out, but you can't see in. And so kids are protected. They have natural light and views where they're used to kind of living in just windowless boxes there.
So moral beauty is different than physical beauty. It's really an intangible, and is measured by a different standard, but it's equally as powerful, and it's really something higher than ourselves. Everyone wants to have a purpose in life, and scientists actually tell us that altruistic behavior actually makes you feel better. It's called the helper's high, and actually giving doles out several different happiness chemicals. Studies also show that doing for others makes you happier than if you were to buy for yourself. My career got started as a nonprofit developer, and we do a lot of our work is doing affordable housing for various nonprofit developers. So I'm going to show a series of projects that are built for both private and nonprofit developers that all have some level of residential affordability in them. This project is called The Six, and it's for homeless veterans. It's 100% affordable, and it represents really a courtyard housing type. There's a big precedent in California for that type, and it's because it's passive. It actually solves a lot of our climate change issues by simply being a good building. We used to call them alphabet buildings in the past because they were shaped like letters in plan. But this one's a courtyard building, and it also has a lot of social uses for people who live there. The Marciano Foundation donated the art that you see on the wall. But it's important for people who live here to actually experience a lot of different types of open spaces, and that's what the courtyard gives us. It's really the lungs of this building.
None of us at the end of a hard day at work say, I think I'm going to go to my housing unit after work. No one says that. People say, I'm going home. And hopefully the residents who have the opportunity to be in a home of their own, leaving a life of homelessness behind, hopefully they feel those same sorts of connections to what a home represents. People are always a little worried about an affordable housing building going in or a supportive housing building going in. And I think all too often, homeless folks who have passed through various systems probably reflect the worst in design. This is the local welfare office. This is the local mental health office. This is the local probation office. At best, pretty utilitarian. At worst, spaces that communicate a very negative message to the people who engage in those spaces. And we think that's a model that should be changed. Design can be used creatively as a solution to ending homelessness, no matter where it exists. So this is a rectangular shaped building on a rectangular shaped lot. Nothing terribly unusual about it. Pretty commonplace actually when you think about it. But I think it says you can do something really imaginative and creative in terms of crafting that solution, even on a plain old apartment building lot. Angie mentioned that the facade of this building is actually a space, which is the first time I heard her describe it that way, and I thought, that is really pretty interesting. The facade is actually a space. This is a great looking building on this block, even without homeless folks in it. The fact that homeless people live here, I think, once again, promotes a very positive depiction of what supportive housing can and should look like, in my opinion.
I used to sneak in McDonald's and stuff, like after the restroom, and go in there and take a bath. My pride was really bad to just go and say I'm homeless. This building is marvelous. So I have family come visit. We have a community room. Like you want guests, your guests don't have to be inside your home. They can be inside the guest room, enjoy your company for a couple of hours, and send them on their merry way.
We created an aperture which was lifted up above the street so that it appears really open. There's a visual connection to the street, but not necessarily a physical connection.
You can come up on the roof and just relax your brains and get your thoughts out and make yourself better. This building right here will make you a better person.
We train our tenants to be architectural critics.
Sonia is our best critic. This is The Rose, which is 35 apartments above the headquarters of Venice Community Housing Corporation, our client. Generally, these buildings look very defensive, and this is another courtyard building. We raised the courtyard up off the street, and then we designed a step planter as a way to mitigate mitigate this defensive look of these buildings, and we removed the guardrail. So the courtyard actually feels completely open. It's really connected to the street, yet this building is totally secure. Gates, security cameras everywhere. This project was for what we call TAY, transitional aged youth, and homeless adults in Venice.
Yeah, so these are kids that, as they say, term out of foster care. Usually when they leave foster care, they don't have a place to go, and this is a home for them. So it's the opposite end of the 6, which is for disabled vets. But
Who are also
nonetheless,
homeless.
yeah, nonetheless, all of them, it's important that you give them a place of pride. Another small thing is we've learned that, plants it makes people feel better. Like, anyone out there hate plants? Like, anyone hate them? I mean, it's just a simple thing that you can do that makes people feel good about themselves.
We also know there's data now that says that your well-being actually is improved when you're closer to nature. So like Larry said, we have plants on this building at all different levels. You actually feel closer to it when you can see it. Even when you're across the street, you can see the green on this building. And most of these buildings are on very tight budgets and very tight schedules. So we like to say that we put 80% of the budget into 20% of the building. And what you're looking at is a scalloped stucco wall with sparkles, which added about $15,000 to what is a $12 million building. But it was a critical part of the design. And when we started, like Larry said, the contractor had never done something like this before. And we had these sparkles on a greater area, and it was about a $200,000 cost at that time. After explaining how to do it, Larry made a model in
we let our project manager try to deal with it to show them it's not that complicated. And we got the price down to 150-something thousand, and we could see our client was going to just get rid of it from the project. So one weekend I went into our shop, turned my phone on, made a little video of me doing the installation on a sample. We sent it to the contractor the next day, final price $12,500.
So the material was very inexpensive, but no one really knew how to apply it. And this is a simple stucco building, basically boxes. So part of what we do is make sure we carry that design thread from the very beginning all the way to the end of construction. And it really made this building very, very special. If you drive by this building between 4 and 6 p.m., you can see the walls sparkle. And we wanted this building to be a sculpture really for the greater community. And when a fire truck drives by, the whole building turns pink. People in the neighborhood call up our client and say, "We love this building. We're so sorry that we went to that public meeting and told you we didn't want it in our neighborhood." The ground floor, we had to sink a few feet because everybody was worried about the height of the building. So the courtyard appears a little bit closer to the street, and it's really a great addition to the street. And we hope that others will look at this example and kind of continue this density down Rose Avenue.
Yeah, and we lower, the idea of these upper courtyards with walls around them. We use planters so that we don't have to have, guardrails, and it makes the upper courtyards feel more part of the street.
And then also, this is a relatively dense building, 35 apartments that are about 360 square feet each. So we wanted to make some spaces for the people who live here. So the red circle is really a sort of a bird's walk where you can actually stand and look at the view. This is
Close to our home. We've lived in this neighborhood of Venice ever since we've been in California, 30 years. And there was a day you could build affordable housing projects and no one would say a word. Now it's gotten to be quite a bougie neighborhood, so everyone comes out of the woodwork, and we got homes with great views. So we decided we would give these kids the same view that everyone else has. So we kind of cheated and made this upper walkway stick out as far as we could over the sidewalk so that they can go up there and have, the 270-degree views from the mountains to the ocean.
Everyone deserves a view. And In the same way that the spiny flower mantis defines useful beauty as a defense mechanism, we know that outward beauty for entire communities reduces NIMBYism and helps us get through the years-long public approval process. And then after this building was built, everyone realized it works both inside and out, and that it can actually be a teacher for a pathway forward. And it was in the New York Times just last month as an example of a way to actually help us solve our homeless problem.
But it's a bit amazing. It always shocks us. We do these projects, we think we're just helping people, and then other people think we're doing something special.
11 NoHo is a mixed-use apartment building in North Hollywood, and it's 65 units. And this is a different type of courtyard, but the same idea, and then it's lifted up above the street, and it becomes really a stage to the street. It feels really open, yet totally secure. This is an example of what we call inclusionary housing, where it's a private developer who provided a certain percentage of affordable units in order to get increased density and increased height. The ground floor is retail and parking, and it's in a neighborhood where it's up and coming, walkable, but it's got a 5-lane highway in front of it, and across the street are other apartment buildings. So we're hoping that this is a little bit of an example of how others can densify this neighborhood. By 2050, cities will be home to 70% of the world's population, and we really feel like these types of buildings are naturally more affordable because they contribute to more walkable neighborhoods by being denser, but they're also very passive because they are these alphabet buildings that are situated around these courtyards. And design is more than a building. It extends beyond the property line to whole communities. Larry and I co-founded a nonprofit probably 30 years ago now because we saw a need for policy and development design in Los Angeles. And the Los Angeles Planning Department would have us write ordinances. This is an example of one of them, which is called the Small Lot Subdivision Ordinance. And it was at the time so that people could actually own their own homes, sort of like brownstones in Boston, where they were fee simple. You didn't need a homeowners association. At the time, it was illegal.
Yeah, and you ask any architect in LA, they know this, that they refer to it as the small lot ordinance. They all know it, they all use it, they just don't know we wrote it.
We also worked with council members, and as we know in Washington, D.C., the politicians have all the power. This is Lincoln Heights, and we actually changed the rules, the zoning rules, to make it better for everyone, not just us. And in Lincoln Heights, this was actually the start of a neighborhood revitalization. Others came in after we built a building in this neighborhood to do the same thing that we did, and we created a pathway for others. But we also learned that public policy is not fixed in stone. And 10 years after we approved the small lot subdivision ordinance and people actually started using it in neighborhoods, people started saying, wow, what's going on in our neighborhood? And 10 years after it was approved, people started wondering, why did we approve that? And is it taking away affordable housing? And is it doing something to our neighborhoods that's negative? And so part of that policy has changed a little bit, but the point of the policy was to take what used to be a single family house and allow people to build 5 houses on that same parcel. So this is an example of 5 houses where one used to be.
These are all projects done under the subdivision by other architects.
Los Angeles has been called 16 suburbs in search of a city. And so this is a way to help us get away from the suburban model and become a little bit more dense. So where one house stood, 5 now. This is Lorcan, O'Hurley. These are just some examples. And this is Barbara Bester, her Blackbirds project. And the policy's been very successful. It provided this opportunity for different types of ways for people to live at different price points, which is exactly what was needed.
And there's now a website that tracks all the small lot subdivision projects.
And it's even touted as a best practice for mid-range density by HUD. We're very proud of that. We also won a grant from the NEA when Maurice Cox was leading it, if some of you know Maurice, to have a one-time institute for nonprofit developers called the Affordable Housing Design Leadership Institute.
We're now in our 15th year.
because we knew that working with the developers over the last 3 decades, 70% of the design decisions are made in the first 10% of the development process, which is before the design architect has even been hired. Most people think the relationship between developers and architects look like this. It's just the two of us. They give us the project, we design the project. But in actuality, it's way more complex. And the complexity of developing these projects becomes a major barrier to design excellence. So the point of doing this nonprofit was actually to get developers in at the very beginning to work with advisors, architects, designers, planners, to actually help them make better decisions at the front end. And it was so successful, it's continued for several years. Katie Swenson at the Enterprise Institute spearheaded it there. And it really talks about the fact that design matters. They actually provide now toolkits and they publish documents after each institute, and it's all on their website and it's all free for anybody to use.
We also look at other things. I think part of the moral part ties into other things like intellectual and social beauty. Having purpose and working on things that are larger than any one individual endeavor is also really powerful, and it is, we believe, to be a form of beauty. 10 years ago, we opened an office in South Florida. We're both from Florida, and while we left a long time ago, we still call it home. And a lot of you know what's been happening with climate and, particularly in Florida. And, we know what's happening, but we look at this list of vulnerable coastal areas, and of that 25 most vulnerable places, 22 of them are in Florida. And if you look at number 8, that's where our office is. This is what's been happening. Okay, that little video on the right is our students at FAU leaving the architecture school after a storm. They're using projects that they had created, other students years ago, to actually get out of the building. And this is happening more and more and more, these ideas. And so we started to think about this idea of how nature and architecture can actually work together better to create maybe a different kind of environment. So this is another one of our parallel universes. We just started to explore this idea, and we started calling for community meetings to just discuss it. These are just some pictures. We were shocked at how many people showed up when we just made a notice to come out and discuss it. So we started doing exhibits as well on this. So we designed and created these exhibits. And last year, the Venice Biennale asked us to exhibit there. And so what we found with these things we take on is that we're doing them for what we think is serving a better purpose or some purpose for us, but they always seem to come around into like jobs. And so the word spread, and the city of Fort Lauderdale wound up hiring us to create this very complicated document called the Design and Construction Manual for their city. This is free online. You can download it. It's a 4-year project that included scientists, botanists, engineers, a whole slew of people, scientists, and we created a way to kind of the city can look at building better in their coastal areas. And when we finished it, we just kept going, and we wrote more grants. We wound up getting about $1 million in grant money through various foundations. These are just some of them, and we worked with students and other schools to further this research. And in the end, this resulted in a new book we just put out. So this just came out a couple months ago. It's about 8 years worth of work and research. And what we try to do was to create a manual to look at coastal regions and how we can better work and build in coastal environments. And we try to make it not just step-by-step guide, but more of a thing to inspire people. So we did every drawing in this book, and we created these kind of drawings to inspire people. This is just one where we show how the ecosystems work in the area. And so people don't generally understand where they live, the nature of where they live. So we went back and we looked at the different ecotypes and, traced their history and what they used to be, and then defined what we term problemscapes and how we could first look at them, what exists, and then look at possible scenarios of how we could better kind of address issues around those regions. And these are just some things where we would go through how we live today and what are the possibilities by looking at ways of what we're now terming unplanning. So sort of looking at ways to better live in the environment that we do. And again, these are just snapshots of, for example, glades adaptation. It's a certain ecosystem. These are transverse glades. So it goes through a whole series of systems of how you can kind of deal with these coastal environments. So, when you write a book, you think you're the expert on it, and then everyone thinks you're an expert. So the city of Fort Lauderdale actually hired us again to do a project. And now we actually had to prove that we knew something about what we were writing. So we got this project right on the beach called DC Alexander Park. You can see to the left, that's downtown Fort Lauderdale. That's about a mile away, and it floods, what they call sunny day flooding. So you get tides and water that back up through the storm drains, and it all stems from like what happens on the coast. So this is our site, and right on the beach, right when we were hired to start this project, we had a storm, and this is what happened. So the city had just spent almost $10 million to re-nourish the beach, bring in new sand, and this storm washed all the sand away. Okay, well, they can't just scoop it up and put it back in the ocean because once it hits the roads and other things, it gets contaminated. So they had to not only lift up all the sand, but they had to truck it away to a landfill because it was all contaminated. And part of the reason is because of how we have dealt with our coastal shoreline. And so we try to show this is what is there now, what we've done. We have flattened things to the point where we get a fresh water pushing up from above, rain coming down, and the coast pushing in. So our land's being attacked from all directions, and we've, in a way, taken away its natural defense. So we try to create this ecosystem within our project that would assist that. So we think of it a bit like a artificial heart valve. We're not trying to take over the heart, but we're trying to assist so that we can better exist in the environment. So this is a kind of ecosystem that we try to create on our site. And so the diagram on the left, you can see the flat site, and we try to really recreate what was a coastal dune in a way. It's a kid's playground, it's a park, it's got an observatory, it's got some public restrooms and other public amenities right on the beach. So here's the plan. You can kind of see how it would help keep the storm surges from just barreling right through the site. This is a photograph from pretty recently. It'll be done in about a month. It has a little observatory so you can circle around the kids' playground and you get up to this place where people can gather, look over the park, but also look out to the ocean. And here's where it is today. So hopefully we will show that, it's not so hard to do beautiful things, but also do things that can help make our places where we live better. We want to close with this idea that was written in a book called Architecture of Happiness by a French philosopher. His name is Alain de Botton. And he wrote in his book about the philosophical and psychological relationship between architecture and our identities. He stated that buildings that we admire are ultimately those which, in a variety of ways, extol the values which we think worthwhile, whether through material innovation, form, color, or service to society. Qualities such as friendliness, kindness, subtlety, strength, and intelligence are part of what we believe are beautiful. Our sense of beauty and our understanding of the nature of what is good are intertwined and inseparable. Beauty is the promise of happiness. Happiness is one of our fundamental human needs, and beauty fulfills that promise. That's why we believe beauty matters. Thank you very much.
Thank you.